Good evening. Nice to see everyone. My name's Kim O'Reilly, and I have the pleasure of serving as the president of the Redding League of Women Voters. It's so nice to see everyone here this evening, and hello to those people who are watching on live stream. It's really great that we have wonderful videographers who can get this broadcasted remotely. That's Bob and Chris in the back, so thank you. I wanted to welcome everyone tonight, and I want to thank our candidates who are running for state offices for taking the time to be here. So thank you, and welcome to Redding. We're happy you're here. If you're not familiar with the Redding League of Women Voters, I just want to let everybody know that we are a nonpartisan organization that works to educate voters and encourage active participation in the political process. We were founded in 1959 here in Redding, and since then we have sponsored a number of events and forums to share information about major public policy issues, and we've been known to have championed many causes within Redding that have had a lasting impact on our community. I invite everybody here to get involved with the League, so if you're not a member, we'd love to have you join. There's forums in the back. We're an equal opportunity organization, as we have many male members as well as several men that serve on our board of directors. So please, gentlemen, consider joining as well. I just want to say that what I love and respect about the League of Women Voters is that it provides a very unique opportunity for individuals of varied political leanings to work across party lines towards a common purpose. And that is truly how our organization works and our board of directors. So it's a very wonderful thing to be able to see happen, very respectful dialogue. Again, our candidates run, who will be debating first, Ann Hughes and Alex Burns for House District 135. I just want to make a note, many of you are familiar, usually expect more candidates up here running for the House seats, but just as a little reminder that we had redistricting here in Connecticut, so District 2 no longer has representation in Redding. So District 135 now includes the whole town of Redding, Easton, and Weston. And then just for your information, for Senate District 26, our candidates will be debating following our first debate. I just wanted to clarify the current towns and cities that are represented under that district. Redding will continue to be part of the district, but the new district has boundaries have shifted somewhat, and it includes the towns of Weston, Westport, Redding, Wilton, half of Ridgefield, and a portion of New Canaan, Darien, and Stamford. So I congratulate right now Ceci and Toni for campaigning in all those communities. That's a lot of communities to reach out to. I think that's a great big job, and it'll be a big job for whoever is elected to represent all those communities. One more little note that I want to call out is on the ballot next Tuesday, there will be a referendum question about making provisions in Connecticut for early voting. I'm not sure if people know, but Connecticut is only one of 4 states in the U.S. that does not offer early voting. So this is a very important issue, and I hope you consider it and think about it when you vote. There's a handout on the table in the back with information about early voting, and on the back side of it is the op-ed stating the endorsement from the Redding League of Women Voters and the League of Women Voters of Connecticut urging of people to vote yes on the referendum question. It can only help to support our democracy. Following tonight's debate, we'll be sharing a link to the recorded debate so those who could not attend can view it at a later time. I'm asking everyone here and everyone in the viewing audience to do 4 things following the debate. 1, I want you to share the recording of the debate with your friends and families who could not attend today. 2, please get educated about the referendum question about early voting. That will be on the ballot next Tuesday. 3, join the Redding League of Women Voters. And 4, most importantly, please get out and vote next Tuesday. I just want to recognize our league volunteers and thank them for all the work they do to help bring you this event this evening. Colleen Joyce, who will be up here in a moment, is our moderator. Cole Tucker Walton is somewhere in the back. He is our supreme advisor about all things debates, very wise counsel. Nicole Bricker, who is one of our newest board members, she is our social media maven. We're learning a lot from her. She got us on Instagram, brought us into the future. And our question screeners in the back, Lori Heiss, Jen Wastron, and Holly Hill. Bob Moran and Chris for filming this evening, and Rob Blick and the Redding Park of Recreation for making this room available and setting it up so nicely. Oh, our timers. Brenda and Phyllis over there. They do a great job. They're really good at it, and they keep our candidates to our time limits. I know it's sometimes they have to be interrupted, and they're very gentle about it. So, thank you. So, it's now my pleasure to welcome Colleen Joyce, who is serving as a moderator for this evening. Colleen is a longtime director on the board of the Redding League of Women Voters. She's a Redding resident and has been here for over 24 years. She is a practicing attorney, has 4 grown children, all who graduated from Joe Barlow High School and are thriving elsewhere, right? Not here in Redding. So here you go, Colleen.
Welcome, everybody. Well, we're going to begin this debate tonight with the candidates for the House District 135. We have Ann Hughes, who's the incumbent Democratic candidate, and we have Alex Burns, who's our Republican candidate. The debate format this evening is going to enable the candidates to have an equal amount of time to answer the questions. Each candidate knows the routine. They have 1 minute to make an opening statement, then 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer each question as we pose it. The timekeepers are going to set the timer. We'll raise a card to indicate they have 30 seconds to finish, and then a time's up card. If a candidate does not abide by this timing, I will step in and kindly remind the candidate. I hope I don't have to do that. I'm confident that we'll all respect this process. We have received some questions in advance. The questions you're going to hear tonight were emailed, and then some are being presented tonight. So if you have questions that you want to pose, please bring them back to the screeners or hand them over to Dan, who will pick them up, and the screeners will screen it, and then I will get the questions. Oh, sorry, and also to Ginny Cohen on that side. Okay. So each round of discussion is going to be initiated by me posing a question to each candidate, and they'll take turns. We've flipped a coin, so Alex is going to begin. Please turn off your cell phones, and we look forward to an informative and civil debate, which will provide an opportunity for all of us to learn the candidates' views. Okay. First question this evening. Oh, yes. Okay. The opening statement begins with Alex.
Well, I'd like to start by thanking the League of Women Voters for hosting this. Debates are a time-honored tradition, and I'm delighted to be partaking in one this evening. Tonight, I intend to lay out to you that I'm a different type of Republican. I'm not the kind of guy that's going to follow the party line if elected. My objective is to serve the people of Redding, Easton, and Weston, not the Republican Party of Connecticut. And so that's the objective. And Connecticut has a lot of troubles facing it. And I think my brand of pragmatic politics has the answers. We have a high debt. People are leaving the state. And it's just, we can reconcile it. We can make it better. Connecticut has immense potential. We're wedged between New York and Boston. We don't have to choose, we don't have to surrender ourselves to the whims of just letting it all go. So I want to emphasize to you tonight that the type of politics I will be putting forward is pragmatic, is sensible, and it's nonpartisan. We can all get behind fiscal responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
So your voice and your vote matter.
critically in this moment, who unambiguously champions your rights, defends your freedoms, the right to vote, and an inhabitable future for your children and their children. For those of you new to the 135th District, welcome. We are a small but mighty district of Redding, Weston, and Easton that work collaboratively with our towns, our governor, our legislative colleagues, and federal delegation to deliver for our families, our farmers, our small businesses, students, our retirees, and our hardworking workforce that contributes every day to our community. And I am here for all of us. This is the season of accountability, where we must hold everyone accountable. We must defend our rights to privacy, to reproductive choice, healthcare, and autonomy, not just bodily autonomy, but the freedom to marry who we love. I'm so excited and grateful to be here with all of you tonight, exercising this important guardrail of democracy, this debate, and especially thankful to the League of Women Voters for amplifying this forum. Let's go.
Thank you. Okay, first question, we're going to start, and you will be the first to respond. Do you support amending the state constitution to permit the General Assembly to provide for early voting? And if so, what early voting provisions do you support?
Well, thank you for asking that question. I wholeheartedly do. It took us a long time to champion getting this passed by 2/3 vote of both chambers in the legislature consecutively so it can come to you on a referendum question in this election. Let's not blow it. What it does is it allows us to amend the state constitution to allow for some sort of early in-person voting. And that gets decided by the legislature in concert with the Secretary of State. And if you talk to the Secretary of State candidates, they imagine a few different scenarios. Maybe a couple of days of early voting. It might not be in this town at your voting place, but if you would like to vote early, maybe you would go to Westport, or maybe you would go to a neighboring town where the polls are open Saturday before, a Tuesday before, you know, or even a week before. But that's not decided. It's just the referendum is going to you.
Thank you. Alex?
Well, I think voting is extremely important. It's the core of our democratic system. And of course, I support early voting. While there are obviously concerns around it, I think generally speaking, it's a plus. And while the specifics haven't been hammered out, I think it's a great idea. Maybe it's 2 weeks ahead of time, maybe it's 1 week, but I think giving people ample time to get out and get the vote out cannot be a bad thing. Thank you.
Thank you. This question, Alex, you'll answer first. The question is, how do you define affordable housing, and what do you think are the best ways to implement the state requirement for affordable housing in your district?
Well, I think the trouble with affordable housing is that 830G isn't particularly, the affordable housing statute isn't particularly tailored to sort of more rural towns like Weston, Redding, and Easton. And I think we have to account for that. We have to really consider that it's not a one-size-fits-all sort of situation. Of course, I'd like to see affordable housing put in. Who wouldn't? But there's a lot of consideration that has to go around it. Oftentimes, that means we'll have to start putting in sewers, start pumping in city water, and that's expensive, and that also harms the environment. So we really have to consider where we're going to put it, how we're going to do it. And so, of course, I support affordable housing. Bringing in people from different backgrounds can only help make our towns better. But we have to really consider the repercussions of suddenly changing the way our towns have been structured for the past 80-odd years. So I think the best way to go about it is trying to find places where we already have the infrastructure in place for affordable housing. And we can build off of that. But tearing up parts of our towns is just not environmentally friendly. And that, to me, is extremely concerning. And so we have to be smart about it. We have to go forward with it, but we have to be sensible. Thank you.
Thank you. If you need me to repeat the question at any time, let me know. But Ann?
I got it.
Okay.
Thanks. Connecticut has one of the lowest vacancy rates in the country. That means there are no rental of units, affordable rental units available for a whole continuum of people. Single parents, returning students, teachers, firefighters, public servants, certainly in the towns where they live and work or where they would like to work. And a lot of folks, retirees, really can't afford to keep up these big, huge homes and heat them and pay the property taxes. So we need a continuum of housing that meets the needs of people, our residents today, not 30 years ago, but today. And we do face a critical housing shortage. How we address that, I am hoping that we can mobilize the public will. I'm very proud that all 3 of our towns did submit an affordable housing plan on time to the Office of Policy Management with some very creative solutions, some micro solutions that fit those towns. And I'm hoping that we can implement some of those and we can grandfather in some affordable units that aren't being counted currently.
Okay, thank you. Next question is going in for you to respond first.
Okay.
Safe development of the wire mill property has been an issue, and it needs funding that far exceeds the resources that Redding has, despite our excellent financial rating. How can you convince others to direct state and federal funding our way, as opposed to the other needs in the state, especially in the cities?
Well, it's an environmental disaster waiting to happen. If it floods, there's a lot of toxins that are going to go downstream all along the Norwalk River right out to the ocean. So it is in need of environmental remediation immediately. And fortunately, we've gotten some new federal infrastructure funds, thanks to our federal delegation, to really address brownfields, environmental sites. We're expanding those resources, and I have no problem championing that to my colleagues. That really, we don't operate in a bubble, so environmental hazards, affect all of us and affect our water quality. We are the reservoirs for all of Lower Fairfield County, so anything that leaches into our reservoirs taints, pollutants taints the entire lower part of the state, and we can't afford that. So I'm ready to champion that.
Thank you. Alex?
Well, I think there is serious environmental concerns if we don't clean it up. As was said, we are the water source for much of Lower Fairfield County. But I think that's convincing enough for some, but I think what really might compel the state and the federal government to really give us the money to do that is by promising to build affordable housing on it. It has the infrastructure there for it. And if we were to tell people, promise and say that that's going to be developed for the use of affordable housing, I think it's suddenly going to convince a lot more people who, the legislature is not just composed of people from Lower Fairfield County. While they might vote that the concern of water and why they might vote because they're concerned about the water, there's a whole 4/5 of the state that doesn't get affected by what happens with our watershed. So I think telling them, those concerned with affordable housing, that if we clean this up and we have the funds to do so, we'll put something on here that helps not just our town, but people who might be looking to move in. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, we'll go first to Alex. Do you support aid in dying legislation, as has been recently presented to the Connecticut legislature? And if so, please explain.
So I sympathize with the argument for aid in dying. If someone has something serious, like very advanced ALS, I think that should be something we talk about. However, I don't think I can get behind it personally. There's too much risk when you open that box. While it might be used respectfully and responsibly, we have to consider that healthcare costs are expensive, and family might compel, whether with good or bad intention, that those who are receiving expensive medical treatment, they might compel them that it might be best to end their life prematurely. And for as many cases as there are where it might be beneficial, I just don't think opening that Pandora's box is in the interest of anybody. We're concerned about, if we're seriously concerned about mental health, we have to consider the fact that people might abuse this system. And I just can't, with good conscience, support a system that opens the door for people to compel their loved ones, whether, again, intentionally or otherwise, to end their life prematurely. So, no, I do not support medical-assisted suicide.
Ann?
If you read the bill, there are guardrails in the most recent legislation that I co-sponsored, and in fact improved on the guardrails of the same proposal in 2020, that 2021, that almost got over the finish line. I fully support, again, people's autonomy and privacy and health care, and dying of a terminal illness, of a deeply painful terminal illness, should not be needlessly painful and cause unnecessary suffering. And dying is a natural process, and we should offer as much support and medical aid as we do in birthing. And I have had the honor of attending several deaths. And, you know, I want for everyone the opportunity to do that with dignity and peace, surrounded by the people that we choose. And to have the guardrails in place that are in the proposed legislation that I co-sponsored and championed many of our constituents here to testify in front of, I fully support, and we will get it over the finish line.
Thank you. Okay, next question. I believe Ann, yes, you'll begin. Okay, the governing body of high school sports allows children to compete in sports by the gender in which he, she, they identify with. If asked to vote on transgender participation in high school sports in the Connecticut legislature, would you support a trans person's wishes to compete by the gender to which he, she, they identifies?
Yes.
Please explain.
Okay. One of the first bills I brought forth with the rest of the Redding delegation proudly came from 8th grade students here in Redding that said they do not feel safe using the bathrooms in their school, and they would like to propose gender-neutral bathrooms. They said, ask any parent, ask any student. They do not feel comfortable using bathrooms in the school, so they hold it all day. I was like, this is crazy. So we proposed a bill, along with Senator Will Haskell and Representative Allie Brennan, and it kind of came out to any new construction of school will include gender-neutral bathrooms as part of you know, just basic biological health. And I support full inclusion, whether it's sports or academics, of trans students and participation in schools, public schools.
And sports, we're also addressing, just so you know.
Sports.
Okay.
Yes.
Alex?
I'd like to draw a distinction between gender-neutral bathrooms and high school athletics. I, of course, support gender-neutral bathrooms. If students feel more comfortable using those bathrooms, why should we tell them they can't? However, athletics, as I said, and bathrooms are not the same. Study after study shows that biological males, who even go under long-term hormone therapy, oftentimes produce larger amounts of testosterone than their biological female counterparts. And I just don't think that's fair. There are obviously some women who can outperform men athletically regardless, but I just don't think it's quite fair to give certain people potentially a leg up in that regard. So no, I don't think gendered bathrooms and athletics are the same, and I do not think that biological males should participate in high school athletics for biological females.
Okay, Alex, what is your position on immigration, and is it good for Connecticut's towns and cities?
Well, I, of course, support immigration. The United States is a nation of immigrants, and I think immigration brings a number of pluses to our country, and our district for that matter. I think it brings in a variety of different opinions and worldviews that we might not be entitled to seeing otherwise. But I fail to really understand what my role as a state representative would really have to do with what happens at the United States southern border. Of course, I welcome people coming in, but I don't think that Hartford controls immigration. I don't think Hartford controls immigration. So, as much as I support immigration and welcome people of all backgrounds to our community, I just don't quite understand what my role as a state legislator would be in making immigration reform. Thank you.
Okay, Ann?
So immigrants contribute $420 million a year annually to Connecticut's economy. They are an essential and vibrant part, especially of our frontline workforce. And they, keep our hospitals and a lot of important essential services running. And I support them as full valued members of our community, and I think it's good for our economy, and then good for our communities and good for America.
Okay, thank you. And what is, in your opinion, is the most important issue to the residents of your district, and how would you address it if elected?
Well, it depends on who I'm talking to. Some young people have said that even though they are out of school, out of college, that they still have nightmares of lockdown drills with active shooters. They have nightmares that they can't seem to, move on from. And that's because it is an active threat. Gun violence, we have normalized lockdown drills, and that trauma that seems to dominate the news every week, every few days, and it is unacceptable. Those same cohort of young people are incredibly upset about the climate crisis and our failure to act, failure to address significantly the climate crisis we face. The economy is, and taxes are another really big concern for everyone. Inflation, heating oil prices, long-term care insurance, health care costs. These, it depends on who you talk to, but these are all our concerns. It's not just one district, but we share those concerns because, quite frankly, we represent everyone. And so we need to champion those intersections and how we address this as a state legislature, as a firewall. Thanks.
Thank you. Alex?
So there's several different groups, as was said, and so it's hard to pick one. And so from what I've heard from a lot of young people is that they feel that Connecticut really doesn't provide a lot of opportunity. People leave the state because it's expensive, there's not many jobs, and it's just, you've got a nice college degree, you're surrounded by New York and Boston, and you can get a better opportunity for the same cost of living and get a better job. So I think for young people, it's really making it more affordable to live here, bringing in business, bringing in things that make young people want to stay around. For young families, when I talk with them, it's about education. It's how do we keep our schools as exceptional as they are? And they're concerned about learning loss during COVID. How do we make that up to those students who have gone through that? That's what they're worried about. And with old folks, it's really about bills, electric bills and food prices and all these sort of little things about staying in place that make it very hard. I hear from a lot of retired people that they have to choose between paying for food or paying their Eversource bills. And I think that's ridiculous. If Eversource, the governor promised that he'd rein in Eversource, and if he doesn't want to, then, you know, maybe we should talk about making it a public utility. Make it responsible to the people, because people who have lived and worked all their lives in these towns should not feel compelled to leave. And that's just ludicrous. And we can address these issues together in Hartford. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex, what education-related issues do you believe deserve priority?
Well, I just sort of touched up on it a little bit. It really comes down to learning loss. I think, as somebody who went through college at the tail end of the COVID crisis, the stark difference in quality of education I received when in person, discussing with my peers and my professors, and on Zoom, was huge. And I can only imagine how difficult it must have been for young men and women in our school system that struggled with this probably a lot more. And so I really think the state should look into how COVID affected these people, not only educationally, but socially. It was really hard for a lot of people. And we have to be considerate about that. Mental health is a serious issue. So when it comes to education, I think my chief concern is COVID learning loss. And how do we make that up? Because the next generation should not be held back from something that they had absolutely no control over. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann?
Well, we've made huge progress in creating a debt-free community college here in Connecticut. We need to go further in investing more in our public higher education, but also on-ramping. We created an Office of Workforce Strategy to start creating more on-ramps for vocational trades, apprenticeships, other types of vocations and careers, viable careers. We had 9 months of job growth and a record historic setting of new businesses starting in Connecticut in 21 and 22. That's why Connecticut's economy is doing better than some of our counterparts. We do need to do a better job of finding affordable options for the best trained, best educated workforce. We're exporting them. We're exporting them from Connecticut, and we want to keep that talent here in Connecticut. And that's why I was proud to co-sponsor paid family medical leave so that so much of our workforce can compete in the global workforce. Keep that talent here.
Thank you. I will urge those who are here, if they have any questions, to please submit them to the screeners. If there's anything that hasn't been addressed, because we have a few more and about 10 more minutes, so if there's something that hasn't been addressed, please put a question in. Okay. This question is, Ann, what will you do to protect a woman's right to make reproductive choices?
I will stay in the streets and in the courts. And I was proud to pass the Connecticut Reproductive Freedom Defense Act, the most strongest defense of a woman's right to her bodily autonomy, her right to privacy, her right to choose, her right to reproductive health care. And as someone with a uterus, it is no one else's business but my provider, and I just can't say that strong enough. That it is frightening, it is terrifying that these rights are being eroded and ended right before our eyes. And I will champion with everyone who joins in that fight, not just for women, but for everyone. And that is my pledge to you. And I have look at my voting record, look at our accomplishment. We form coalitions. We fight with our Attorney General, with our governor, and with our judges to defend our rights and our freedoms right here in Connecticut.
Alex?
Well, one of the best things about living in Connecticut is that a woman's access to abortion isn't under threat. It is a delight to know that even as the rest of the country seems to be backsliding on this issue, Connecticut remains firm and stalwart in its defense of a woman's right to choose. And that's amazing. And if elected, I intend to continue that tradition. If the Republican Party in Hartford somehow manages to think it can roll back those rights, I'm not going to vote with them. It's bigger than that. It's between a woman and her doctor. It's not for the state legislature to decide. And so I'm happy where Connecticut is currently. I'm happy to know that it's not under threat. And if elected, I promise to defend that ability, that right to choose. And thank you.
Can I rebut that? I mean, not rebut him, but just expand on what's a
When you have your
threat.
time, you can
Okay.
speak as you wish.
Okay.
But next question is going to go to Alex. Name 3 things that need to happen for Connecticut's economic expansion and what you would do to facilitate that.
Well, it starts by cutting taxes. Connecticut has some outlandishly high taxes on just about everything. We have a pink tax. If you want to get your nails done, as a woman, you have to pay more. And there's no golf tax. It's absurd. And so we start with, where can we cut taxes on people? Where can we make it so that people want to bring business in? Where can we make it so that people want to stay? But if we're going to cut taxes, we have to be serious about cutting spending. Debt is just another form of a tax that is levied on people who have been who don't even live here yet, and that's unfair. We have to look where we can make the government more efficient. Where can we get rid of redundancies? Where can we work with the private sector to offload some of those costs that Connecticut racks up? And so those are the first 2, and then cutting red tape on opening business. Connecticut is, in comparison to surrounding states, very difficult to open a small business. And if we want to have business growth, we have to incentivize people. If Massachusetts and New York provide better opportunity, why open a business here? So it's all about starting with cutting taxes, balancing the budget, and making Connecticut just a bit easier to open a business in.
Thank you. Ann?
I am proud to have voted for 4 consecutive balanced and on-time budgets that did not raise the effective tax rate. But in fact, we provided $600 million in tax cuts in this most recent budget. I would expand and maintain the earned income tax credit at 41.5% of the federal EITC. I would expand and make permanent the child tax credit. And make it refundable for working families. This is a huge, huge economic driver, putting that money back in the pockets. I would also pivot hard to renewable energy jobs and the green sector. That is why I serve on the environmental standards of the offshore wind industry. We could be the launch pad, not just for New England, but for the country for offshore wind components. And we need renewable energy, we need a green sector, and we could be all of that with our advanced manufacturing and our biotech industry, and we are investing new resources through the Office of Workforce Strategy, and I'm very proud of that.
Thank you. Given what we know today, would you support mask mandates if there is another outbreak? And that would start with you, Ann.
I support following the science and what the guidance of the expertise. We were using a lot of expertise from Yale Infectious Control about, I work in a nursing home, and we have mask mandates in place to protect our residents, and I certainly abide by that. It might be a situation by situation and not a across the board, but I want to be responsible to my other most vulnerable members in the community, especially in public closed spaces. And if somebody needs me to wear a mask to feel comfortable face to face, then I will obviously honor that. I do not support a blanket a mandate unless it is called for by the setting that we're in, which my work setting is, and I abide by it faithfully.
Thank you. Alex?
Is this in regards to just the public sector or just a blanket ban across the whole state?
The question is, if there's another outbreak, do you support mass mandates? So you can qualify it as you wish.
Well, I think if a private business wants to make you wear a mask when you come in during a COVID outbreak, I think it's their right to do so. However, I think the role of the state is to not do that. I don't think a mandate of that variety is necessary. I don't think the state has the right to get involved in that in such a personal matter. So no, I think I would be opposed. No, I know I would be opposed to a blanket ban across the whole state. If a private business wants to make that decision for itself, it may do so, but the state should not place down a blanket ban.
Thank you. All right, this starts with you, Alex. Should Connecticut adopt ranked choice voting?
Absolutely. Ranked choice. One of the best things about ranked choice voting is, as we've seen, it brings, in our age of partisan politics, ranked choice voting forces candidates to be smarter, more sensible, and more to the middle, because it allows people to choose multiple options. And I think not only does it allow people more options, but that gives our smaller Connecticut third parties a real chance, a real fighting chance to represent the interests of their communities. So I absolutely support ranked choice voting. In the same vein that I support early voting because it's more democratic and it makes it more accessible to people, I support ranked choice voting because it makes democracy more accessible and more open and more diverse, because there's a potential for candidates who might not regularly get elected from parties that might not gain support normally to really have a chance. And I think if we're serious about having a pluralistic republic, whether it's in the state or in the national scene, we should really be open to this. So absolutely, I would support ranked choice voting.
Thank you. Ann?
Yes, I do. I think that what we want is a really representative democracy that gets over 50% of the vote, and I think that ranked choice voting encourages the public to research candidates and vote on policy versus party. And if you can really find a preference of folks for their policies and for their person, the candidate, the preferences, then we have a more representative democracy. And I think we could get more voter engagement and a feeling that indeed your vote mattered and your preferences were reflected in who represents you. And I'm a big fan of that and a big fan of democracy. And yes.
Thank you.
Let's go.
Thank you. Okay, Ann, what priority do you place on equalizing educational opportunities across the state? And what can be done to address this issue?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I put a big premium on it. You know, I think we have a responsibility to all of our children, regardless of zip code, to provide a quality public education, even early childhood education. We are ranked third in the country for our education system. It's why a lot of folks move here. And yet, it is woefully inequitable. There are some sectors of our small state that have really atrocious public education, and that is not fair for those children. We're only 3.7 million people total. There's no reason why we as a public can't be determined to provide adequate public investment in our education for every child in Connecticut. It's less than 1 million kids. We can do this, and we probably have to invest more in the education cost sharing grant, pick up some of the tab for transportation, special education costs, outsourcing some of the kids. We can do that as a state if we determine that our students, no matter what zip code they live in, are worth it. Yes.
Alex?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. What priority do you place on equalizing educational opportunities across the state, and what can be done to address this issue?
Well, I think it's been clear in study after study that education is the direct way to getting an increased income. For each degree a person gets, they make more money. And if we're serious about getting people good educations and good jobs, we have to really invest in our education. There are parts of the state that are underfunded or just don't have the programs that we're lucky enough to have. And so I think we really have to examine it. We have to look where we can work together on certain issues. Where we can work together on certain issues. There are multiple ways one can go about this. And whether that means, again, sharing costs between other schools potentially, or working with, potentially bringing in even just talk of bringing in students in our schools. Sometimes I know that in Weston we have not a vacancy, but a few open seats. And if we want to put some butts in those chairs from other surrounding towns, I think that's for our benefit. Because in the long term, if we provide people with good education, it means that they'll be more successful, more happy, and in the grand scheme, it'll probably mean that we have to pay less in the long run. So I think really looking to invest more money into our education and really looking at ways to make it more equitable and more equitable would be a good thing to do.
Okay. If elected, and this is going to you, Alex, first, how will you vote what is best for your constituents and the state when the state party or national party dictates a different position?
So I've made it abundantly clear throughout my campaign that the type of Republican I am is one that is fiscally responsible and socially moderate. And if the party decides that it wants to do something that violates those principles, that violates the integrity of our towns, I'll buck it. I don't see a need. My loyalty is not to the Republican Party, but to the people of the 135th. That's Weston, Redding, and Easton. And if I think, and you've made it evident to me, that it's not helpful, that you don't want that law or that policy to go forward, it is no skin off my back to tell the party to jog on and support the people of our 3 towns. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann?
It's policy-based, not party-based. Leadership may have a different agenda, and if there is something in a proposed legislation that really stinks, then I will always pledge to you that I will champion why I am not voting for it on the floor of the House, so I give a record of why I don't support it. And that you'll know that. It may pass anyways without my vote, but sometimes we sway folks from the back row caucus that I'm a member of. So, you know, again, we work really, really hard to understand and to be at the table when we are proposing this and to really champion proposals that come from our constituents, and that's from all of you. And to get those over the finish line is no easy feat. We got to form coalitions and a lot of pressure from outside the building. It's not just about the colleagues or our leadership. It's about what the public wants, what the public demands. And that's why, like young people, even people who are too young to vote, that's why their voice matters.
Okay, thank you. This is the last question before your closing statements. So we'll start with you, Ann.
Okay.
Which specific committees would you like to serve on, and how do you manage to do that?
I would like to serve on all of them. I have begged leadership, please let me stay on insurance, and I'm also vice chair of aging, and I'm also on human services, because that's my jam, that's my field, and I'm also on labor and public employee. No, you only get 3. So that's how I serve on what I serve. But I have moved around a little bit because I'm really passionate about creating affordable health care for all and trying to champion a public option for everyone to have an affordable healthcare plan to buy into, but you know, I can only be on 3, and I am very passionate about getting meaningful proposals for retirees and seniors aging in place, and more robust services and investment. So I am vice chair of aging, and I serve on many oversight councils and committees outside of those 3 committees to do the work.
Thank you. Alex, do you want me to repeat the question? You have it?
It's regarding committees, correct?
Yeah, which committees would you like to serve on in the legislature, and how would you manage to do that?
I'd really like to serve on the Environmental Committee. There's a number of reasons, and one of them is simply we have an abundance of natural beauty around here that I'd really like to maintain. But the natural beauty goes beyond just aesthetic pleasures, and it's a lot of people move to our towns because of the privacy. Having these vast forests allow us a great deal of it. But also, our ecosystem is very delicate, and there's a lot of animals that rely on the vast forests that make up Easton, Weston, and Redding to mate, to grow up, and, you know, they keep to themselves. And if we start just knocking down trees and putting stuff up, we not only run the risk of harming their habitat, the ecosystem that we rely on, but also it directly might affect us. Deers, which are already troublesome as is, might find roads a bit more appealing more often. And also, our watersheds are very delicate. In Weston, the high school found PFAS, a very dangerous chemical, in the water, and we couldn't allow students to drink our public water. That's absurd. And in Easton, they found gasoline in the wells. So I really want to shore up, if elected to be put on the Environmental Committee, really shore up the defense of our ecosystem and environment in the area. Because without that, if we don't have clean drinking water, there's no Easton, Weston, or Redding to be had. So that's why I really want to be on the Environmental Committee.
Thank you. Okay, and now we're at your closing statement. And Anne, you are first.
I'm deeply humbled to be chosen by you to be your state representative these last 4 years, and I'm determined to continue to elevate our communication, access, and accountability of your representative government, not only at the Capitol in Hartford, but meeting you in the streets and at rallies, at your doorstep, meeting for coffee at Uncle Leo's or Greiser's, or at the transfer station, or at town meetings with Eversource, or whatever comes next that concerns you. If it concerns you, it concerns me. And that's why I champion legislation to get the referendum question on this ballot about Connecticut allowing early in-person voting. We deserve unambiguous champions of our rights and policy leadership, and I'm so excited to serve as your champion. I will be greeting and cheering you on at the polls on Election Day for exercising your sacred American right to vote in this moment and all future elections, because it has never mattered more that we show up and have our voice count. You matter, and I'm deeply humbled to have your support and vote in the trenches to fight alongside you together as your state rep. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Alex?
I pride myself on the fact that I am willing to come before you tonight and say that the party I'm affiliated with is not my master. That the people before me, the people of Easton, Weston, and Redding, are the ones I'm responsible to. The policies I want to put forward in Hartford are pragmatic. They're sensible, and most importantly, it's doable. Cutting taxes at a responsible rate is not a pipe dream. Defending our environment while also putting forward plans to have equitable housing is not a pipe dream. These are doable things. And it's about being pragmatic in politics. It's about finding that common ground. Weston, Easton, and Redding are not 100% of any party affiliation. And I want to go to Hartford to represent not just the Republicans, but the unaffiliated, the Democrats. And if there are any Greens or Libertarians out there, I want to represent you too. It's about building consensus. And that's the type of politician I want to be. I want to represent all of you going forward after November 8th. Thank you.
I want to thank both you and Alex for your time, your effort, your drive, and your insight into all of these various questions. And I'd like one more round of applause for our candidates.
Thank you for showing up. Your democracy.
We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll have the Senate District 26 candidates on the panel. Thank you. We now have the candidates for the Senate District 26. And to my left, first is Ceci Maher, who's the Democratic candidate, and then Toni Boucher, who's the Republican candidate. Okay. They're familiar with the drill since they were here and have seen the process. So I'm going to give each of you a 1-minute opening statement, and we'll start with Ceci.
Okay, thank you. Is this close enough? Okay, how about that? Is that better? Yes. Awesome. Okay, so hi, I'm Ceci Maher, and I lived in Wilton half my life, but I grew up in Stamford. You all are aware that it's a totally different district now in that Bethel has gone off and we've picked up Stamford and Darien. So I grew up in the district in Stamford, and I raised, my husband grew up in Wilton, and so that is where we chose to raise our children. I volunteered at the PTA. I've done Minks to Sinks, the Board of Finance, and been on the board of the library, also on the board of ABC. And I've run Horizon Student Enrichment Program, Person to Person, and Sandy Hook Promise as executive director. My work has always been about helping people through difficult periods, so the entire community comes out stronger. And when you send me to the Senate, I will bring that frontline experience, my love of the district, my experience as a spouse, a working mother, and a community leader to Hartford. Thank you.
Thank you. Toni?
I love Connecticut,
Thanks.
but it's become unaffordable. It's a state with the lowest economic growth that has more people and jobs moving out than moving in. I've been a business leader in top corporations and owned small businesses. I am proud to have served as Redding's Chief Deputy Minority Leader in the State Senate. I've also been a minority leader in the House, State Board of Education member, selectman, and Board of Education chair. I know firsthand the impact state policies have on our businesses and residents. This election will be about local control of education and property rights. It's also about making our community safer by supporting law enforcement. State efforts to regionalize our school, take away control of zoning decisions, and weaken our police have passed out of committee. These efforts did not pass when I was your state senator. As a social liberal and fiscal conservative, I've worked really hard to reduce costs, improve education, and make Hartford more responsive. We can make Connecticut more affordable through lower taxes and energy prices, a pro-business environment that makes it easier to keep jobs here. If elected, you know I'll be your fiercest advocate.
Thank you. Okay, we will have some similar questions and then some different questions for this panel. First, Toni, I'll start with you. Do you support amending the state constitution to permit the General Assembly to provide for early voting? And if so, what early voting provisions do you support?
Yes, I would support that initiative. The way I would do it, however, in order to save local costs at your town hall and the registrar of voters overhead cost, is to increase and expand early no excuse absentee voting. That process has already been established. It can be done more early, and it can also be used in the same processes that they're using right now. They're familiar with it, and I think that that would be a good way to seamlessly bring the voting ability to all people.
Thank you. Ceci?
Your vote is your voice, and I firmly believe that everyone's voice should be heard. I do support early voting. However, I support it in a different way than Toni does. We already have absentee ballots. We definitely need to continue having absentee ballots, but what we need to do is open the Constitution and put in early days of access, because not everyone can get to the
polls on one single day. And an absentee ballot is a 3-step process. You must request it, you must fill it out, and you must return it. And in that, it lowers the opportunity for someone to have a voice. I'm fully aware of the costs inherent in adding additional days of voting. And I know that the people who are running, well, Stephanie Thomas, who's running for Secretary of State, has been researching early voting. And what I have heard, although none of this is written in stone, they're looking at several days of voting, not a long extended period of time, and potentially we will look at ways that maybe it's a part-time, part of a day, not a whole day. So there's a lot to be discussed, but giving everyone access, shift workers, moms, people who are watching other family members, we need to give everyone the voice to vote.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with you, Ceci. How do you define affordable housing, and what do you think are the best ways to implement the state requirement for affordable housing in your district?
Affordable housing, and I'm presuming by this you're talking about the statute 830G. 830G has been in place for about 30 years, and there have been many, many zoning laws that have been put in place as a function of 830G. So we can't just say, okay, baby out with the bathwater. There are a lot of laws that have to be looked at, not laws, a lot of zoning decisions that have been made that we need to look at as we look to how we can amend 830G. And it does need to be amended. It has been successful in some ways, but in fact, right now, there is only 2.5% vacancy rate in the entire state of Connecticut, 1.5% vacancy rate in Fairfield County. That means that anyone who wants to move out of their home, where are they going to move to? So when we talk about affordable housing, it is about the people who want to stay in our communities, who have spent tremendous amount of time volunteering, people like myself who want to downsize, but where am I going to go? Students who are coming back from college who want to live in the town that they grew up in, and the people who work that we interact with every day in our communities. We need to figure out how to make this work for the communities that we live in.
Thank you. Toni?
Zoning decisions are best made at the local level by local planning and zoning commissions with community input. We need to reform 8-30G instead of expanding it as they're trying to do now by mandating state control of housing within a half-a-mile radius of any train station. Imagine what West Redding would look like. Hartford also wants the state to have oversight over local town housing authorities by extending city housing authorities' control over adjacent small towns and regionalizing planning and zoning functions. We need to protect local control in all areas of municipal government, ensuring local property taxers have the loudest, most influential voice on issues that affect their community. This can be accomplished by a town's own design for affordable housing plans that fit within their community's ability to provide services, water, utilities, transportation, and traffic mitigation. Legislation that solidifies the ability of municipalities to govern themselves without undue state interference should include removing state-imposed barriers to voluntary regional shared services, and we have a lot of voluntary shared services being done now, and including existing properties that meet income-based affordability standards and eliminate the requirement for deed restrictions for owner-occupied affordable housing, which restricts the ability to create home equity.
Thank you. Toni is going to start with you.
Sure.
My family moved here in 2018, and we've spent the last 4 years loving Connecticut. What have you done in the last 4 years to show that you love Connecticut?
Well, my time in public service expands a few decades, and I did a lot that I was very proud of, especially in the area of education and transportation and the environment. There's no question. But in the 4 years that I have not been in office, I've been working in the private sector for an investment firm for over 22 years, and we have developed an investment program for sustainable new startup businesses that are actually producing positive returns in a way to help the environment as well. I've also I'm serving on Friends of Sherwood Island State Park, Voices for Hope, which is a Jewish organization that actually teaches the Holocaust education that I helped to spearhead and pass in 2018. It is an offshoot of the Jewish Federation of Connecticut, and I'm very proud to serve there. I also have been involved locally with a lot of organizations that I never had the time to do before. But most importantly, I have teamed up with the business school I graduated from. I got my MBA at UConn, and they and I are meeting and developing a brand new department at the business school at UConn of entrepreneurship and innovation. I'm really excited about that because I really think that could help not only young people, but our economy in Connecticut.
Thank you. Ceci?
So the past 4 years, I've been kind of busy. I was working at person to person and trying to make certain that people were getting the food that they needed. So I expanded the program in food delivery at person to person from when I got there in 2005 till by the time I left in 2019. We went from giving out food for 176,000 meals to giving out food for more than 2 million meals. And I grew that organization from serving 15,000 people a year to serving 25,000 people a year. After person to person, I took a little bit of time off and I enjoyed Connecticut. I read some books, I worked in my garden, I went to the beach, it was wonderful. And I did a few trips. I went from there to be interim executive director at Sandy Hook Promise in Newtown, helping them with a reorganization. And that was 3 days before the pandemic hit. So during the pandemic and until spring of last year, I was working on Zoom with the founders at Sandy Hook Promise, trying to make sure how are we going to bring all the programs and all the learnings and teachings that were taking place across the country, how are we going to do it when we were no longer able to go into a classroom? And I helped them pivot into direct service through Zooms, through webinars, and we ended up serving so many more people, kids in the classroom. It absolutely multiplied. So that's pretty much what I've been doing. And since then, I've been running for office.
Thank you. I'm going to start this with you, Ceci. How do you think the state should address the problem of climate change?
Oh, that's such a great one. That is something that concerns me all the time. So I can tell you what I've been doing in my life on climate. I have always been drying my clothes outside, composting, and refusing to use any fertilizer on my lawns because I believe that we need to absolutely take care of our neighbors. We don't want fertilizers going downstream. But now let's look at it at a bigger picture. We need to increase the different kinds of energy that we are using in Connecticut. So that means solar, that means wind power, that means that we need to reduce emissions. And something else we can do for climate is we need to look at the high cost of waste hauling, the impact it's having on our towns, and we need to start looking at composting because 30% of the waste hauling is vegetative waste. And other towns, including Stamford started out with a recycling program down in the center of town, and they've now increased it into the northern part of Stamford. It can be done in cities. I lived in San Francisco for 3 months during the pandemic, and we did it in the city of San Francisco. That reduces methane. Methane is 25 times more dangerous to our environment than carbon dioxide.
Thank you. Toni?
We're confronting very serious issues of pollution that really harms our health and our environment. We have a multitude of polluters: electronics, plastic, water, air, ocean, landfill, toxic waste, pollution, and contamination. I believe that as awareness of this grows, humanity will be more creative than ever. It has started to do that. Technology will help us solve our problems. And a lot of sustainability-related issues and problems will find solutions. I'm more hopeful than before. But we can't rely on just old technologies. I have personally at home a new modern countertop composting machine in our kitchen for food scraps. This technology can be used on a much larger scale. Plastic-free options, smart metering, black fly larvae in landfills are even proposed. This is a few things. We have a tremendous problem in our oceans, but there are ocean floaters that are being deployed to pick up what's called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch trash and take it for recycling, which is a good thing. Recycled plastics are being used for applications on roads and roofing material, and recycling glass in building materials as well. There's so much more than we can do. It should be noted that I was the only Republican voting in favor of Connecticut's global warming bill in 2008. This bill was proposed by Governor Rell and then the DEP Commissioner, Gina McCarthy, who later became the U.S. EPA Administrator under President Obama. And when it was signed into law, it was requiring emissions to be reduced by 10% in 2020 and 80% by 2050. As a result of this and other conservation initiatives, I was given a Legislative Champion Award twice when I was up in the legislature.
Thank you. Okay, this has been asked in a few different ways, so the question is, how do you define woke? And one is, what does this mean and how important is it that our politicians are or are not woke?
Well, that's a very unusual question for sure. I've often wondered what that terminology means as well. I feel that I'm pretty much awake and aware of what is happening around me and very sensitive to the changes in our society and different people's points of view. You know, terms like that and as well as DEI have become lightning rod words that people throw around. And I think the aim of most is a good one, and that is we need to be more tolerant, inclusive. We need to learn and appreciate people from other cultures, points of view, other genders, and so forth. But I also am concerned that there is less tolerance today by different points of view. One example is I'm a very pro-choice Republican and independent, I might add, as well. But I also find there are many that demonize those that are pro-life, not respecting their deeply held, points of view, and often bully them and insult them. I think that's wrong. We need to be tolerant of everyone's point of view. And we don't need to criticize and insult them for having a different one than ours. I have very strong views, there's no question, and it shows by my 22-year record in the House and Senate. I'm probably the most liberal Republican that we have, and as a result, gained the highest crossover vote from Democrats than anyone up in the legislature.
Thank you. Do you need me to repeat this question?
No, thank you. I don't think so. What is woke? Well, I think people define that, everyone defines that sort of a different way, don't they? I mean, isn't that what we all are coming from different perspectives and have our own ways of thinking about things? And I think what I want to say most about woke and collaboration is that, contrary to what my opponent keeps telling people at the doors, I actually am one of the most collaborative people that I have in all of the things that I have run, in the multi-million-dollar nonprofits. I have always worked incredibly well with my staff. As a matter of fact, with every new staff person that comes in, I sit with them and I say, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I only do well when we all do well. And I need to hear everyone's thoughts, so everyone contributes to the growth and to the success of the nonprofits that I was running. And so we had really positive successes in those nonprofits, and whenever I have talked about what has been accomplished, I have always used the word we, because it has always been a team, and that's what I expect to do when I go to Hartford, is go up there and work with everyone.
Thank you. This will start with you.
Okay.
What obligation do you have to provide accuracy in your campaign materials?
Thank you for that question, because I have been incredibly accurate in my campaign materials. Every single material that I have put out, everything that I've said, has had an annotation or a connection to the information, pointing directly, because one of the things that I want you all to know is that I don't lie. I am not deceptive. I don't believe in it. And so if you look at my campaign materials, you can see the annotations. It directs you to where you can find the information. And so I have put out honest campaign materials.
Thank you. Toni?
Well, thank you for that question. Having been in this particular area of politics for a while, I'm pretty much used to having my record misinterpreted and often distorted. In fact, I can recall the very first race I actually ran for state representative. I'd had a debate much like this the week before, and then the night before the election, there was a flyer that was sent to every mailbox that Toni is pro-life. You know, you can't trust her. When I was obviously had mentioned that I am a pro-choice candidate, I've always been, I confronted the individual the next day, you know, it was voting day, and he just literally walked away. You know, it has happened many times during my campaigns because it's so easy to try to paint a candidate through national issues rather than being honest about their personal record and in office. Fortunately, I do have a 22-year history. I do have votes that were taken both on women's right to choose, on gun laws, on gay marriage, and have been out there doing the hard work while others just decide to do attacks. I had an attack mailer, and I have a horrible attack TV ad, and also robocalls that distort my record. As a result, I've had to put out one mailer to actually explain the reality and the truth. It's unfortunate that campaigns devolve in that way, but outside of that one mailer, our campaign is totally positive.
Thank you. Those are two great answers. I like hearing that it's positive and truthful. Okay, this is Toni. To start, my son is LGBTQ. What will you do to protect his right to marriage equality?
Well, what a wonderful question. I also have family members that are gay. Some have done very well and are in committed marriages to each other. Unfortunately, one took his life. It was devastating to us as a family. I voted for gay marriage in the Senate to codify it in 2009. When I was in the House, however, I did vote against civil unions because at that time there was a lot of dissatisfaction with that law. A lot of my gay friends and family felt that it was not equal. And a few years later, the Connecticut Supreme Court struck down Connecticut's civil union bill, saying exactly what we thought. It was not equal. So when we had an opportunity to make sure that was codified in state law in the Senate, I was very pleased to do that, and I'm very proud to receive the Law Cabin Republicans' endorsement. They are a LGBTQ organization for the Republicans.
Thank you. Ceci?
First off, I want to go back a little bit, and I will address the question. But I want to go back a little bit because my opponent said that there has been negative ads and lies that have been put out about her record, and in fact, every single thing that has been written on any of my mailers has been annotated and directly connects back to legislation that Toni has voted on. In terms of this, Toni voted for the amendment that said that marriage was between a man and a woman. She voted for that. That is fact. So whether she politically expediently changed her opinion when it had already been ruled by the Supreme Court, that is a different topic altogether. But she did vote for that amendment that turned it, that marriage in Connecticut was between a man and a woman, even though she had been asked by many people in the community not to vote that way.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. The governing body of high school sports allows children to compete in sports by the gender in which he, she, they identify with. If asked to vote on transgender participation in high school sports in the Connecticut legislature, would you support a trans person's wishes to compete by the gender to which he, she, they identifies? Ceci.
Yes, I would. And I'll tell you why I would. Because the number of people there is so much mental health impact when someone is not allowed to be who they want to be. And the suicide rate and the self-harm rate among transgendered youth is significant. And we cannot, as a society, tell someone that they are not who they are. We must support people in the way that they present themselves and how they see themselves in the world. There is such an incidence of mental health problems amongst all of our youth. It is a real epidemic, and it's not just because of the pandemic. It has a lot of different reasons. It has to do with the parents' anxiety about gun violence. It has to do with, yes, the internet. But there is so much out there. How can we add when we have the choice not to? How can we add to it when we have the choice to recognize someone as they are? So yes, I support it.
Toni?
Women fought very hard to have equal access and resources for women's sports. Title IX was very difficult to pass, and when it did, it actually provided tremendous amount of financial resources and equity in our schools, in our colleges, for women to be able to compete. We do not have co-ed football, basketball, and other sports. We may have co-ed tennis and other activities, but even in golf, there are two separate teams. The reason for that is that so women can get to the top of their profession in a way where they can compete reasonably and well. There is no question that there is a difference in physiology. Not in grit, determination, work ethic, and so forth, but there is a reality. Just like I would love to play basketball professionally, and there's no way that I am limited by my size and probably strength, but I did play intramurals, and I was a pretty good point guard in my high school class. But when I was playing field hockey, and I was on the varsity team in high school, and I tried out, the first time the tryouts were at the university level, I just walked away. They were so much bigger and stronger than I was, even though I loved the sport. So there is a physical reality, and I don't want women to feel that they cannot compete in a sport that they've practiced for their entire lives.
Thank you. Now, Toni, we have the next question for you.
Sure.
We hear that the state law, that the state has a very high budget surplus and very high debts. What is the relative importance of each of these?
That's an excellent question. We're enjoying right now a historic surplus in our rainy day fund or reserve. We've also paid down quite a bit of debt, but that was only as a result of the first time in 100 years where we had a tie vote in the state Senate. I was lucky to be there for that. I was always relegated to ranking member, and I think I served on practically every committee in the legislature, from housing to judiciary to appropriations and so on. But in that wonderful year of 2017 and 2018, we had a total tie vote, 18-18. That allowed us to be very much involved in the budget process. And what we won was a spending cap, bonding cap, and volatility cap. Wall Street really liked that and improved our ratings, in fact. And it required that any surpluses would go in the rainy day fund and required that we pay down some of our debt. We're reaping the benefits of that right now, and it speaks to the value of having balance. So both sides must come together, find common language, and pass something that is beneficial for the state. Representing all sides. We need to return to that, but since that time, there have been multiple attempts to take back those spending caps, to take things off budget so they wouldn't count. And we are staring at a huge debt. It was refinanced twice, once by Malloy and once by this current administration. All that does is move your debt out and increases by billions of dollars the interest rate that is going to be charged on that debt to future generations. I am very concerned about that. I think it's something that we must address. We can't just rely on the momentary surplus that we have now.
Thank you. Ceci?
Can you just, if you would read the question?
Yes. The state has very high budget surplus and very high debts. What is the relative importance of each of these?
So I think it's really important to say, just start straight off, is that Toni likes to talk a lot about the 2017 budget that they did on a bipartisan basis, but the Republicans took a tremendous amount of responsibility for. In fact, that 2017 budget was never signed, and in fact, that budget had to go back and be reworked for the next 4 months. It was one of the only times in years that we have not had an on-time budget. And it was not signed by the governor, and then it had to be redone. So as far as the spending caps and the volatility caps that Toni also references, they did not come out of the Republican side of the budget, and that is something that she likes to take a lot of credit for. I have gone back to people who were present during those times and talked to them, and that is not the case. Now, on to the spend down and the fact that we do have a rainy day fund and we do have a surplus, and we have paid down $5.4 billion in our pension liability, which has freed up $450 million a year for the next 25 years that we will not be paying in interest payments. And right now we know that we have heard from many, and we don't know what the future is about to bring us. We don't. There's a talk of recession. We know we have inflation. But we hear from the Republican side that they want us to release that money and spend it, and that is not fiscally prudent.
Thank you. What, in your opinion, is the most important issue to the residents of your district, and how would you address it if elected?
Is that me first? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so there are many issues in front of our district. It is a big district. It's 8 towns. So depending on what town you're speaking to, there are different issues that people feel are most important. I know here in Redding, one of the issues that is really important is the trees and making sure that the Eversource is not cutting the trees. That's huge, and I've been at many meetings to hear what the concerns are of the residents on that. Another thing is preserving the open spaces, and then if you move into another town, the issues are different. The issues are transportation, the issues are inflation is always a big one, but something that I have heard time and time again across the entire district is the issue of our children's safety, the issue of guns, the issue of being afraid that a child is not going to come off a bus at the end of a day. This is something where I have had parents telling me with tears in their eyes that they don't want to have a conversation before their child starts kindergarten telling them about active safety drills. I've sat with a dad who has been in the coffee shop and positioned himself so that he can see his child's nursery schools to make sure that they're safe. We must do more about our guns. We must do more to prevent gun violence.
Thank you. Toni?
Thank you so much. The things that I hear when I talk to people, and we've both talked to thousands, are these 4. Not 1, but 4. But most importantly, if it was number 1, it would certainly to make Connecticut more affordable through tax relief. We have to lower the tax burden on our families and seniors and strive to make health care and energy costs less expensive, and do something for our business environment that makes it easier to create jobs. We must take out the 1 extra percent, which makes it 7.35% for our restaurant meals. Restaurants are hurting. They're struggling to stay alive. Number 2, we need to protect the local control of education and respect parent involvement in our schools. I would propose that we use ARPA funds to make up for the lost 2 years of learning in reading and math that's been documented since the last 2 years. We have to protect local control of our homes and not have the state making the zoning decisions and putting high density in places where they don't belong. And lastly, and we haven't talked about this, but making our communities safer. Our number 1 responsibility as elected leaders is to keep our people and communities safe. I'll continue to strengthen our criminal justice law that we have, and also to strengthen law enforcement so that they have the tools that they need. Connecticut actually passed the worst anti-police bill in the entire United States, and it needs to be looked at and be addressed. Police morale is at an all-time low, and burglaries are up in our little communities.
Thank you. Now, sort of tied into that, the question is, they're racially motivated and scare tactics have increased over the past 6 years. How would you respond if an incident occurred in one of our towns? Toni.
I'm happy that you asked that question. Some years ago, we had some terrible anti-Semitic activities happening in our small communities in Redding and Ridgefield and Wilton and Westport. It was deeply hurtful to that community. And I had spent 12 years trying to pass an Holocaust education mandate because it appeared that our students had no idea the graffiti that they were putting around town and the actions had such a hurtful result. Luckily, in 2018, I did spearhead that bill again and finally was able to get it passed. And now we have books being read, we have curriculum being provided to our students at even the 4th grade level, right on through high school. I think that has sensitized a segment of our community. I think we are paying more attention to racial discrimination as well, and we spend a great deal of time in celebrating and recognizing Pride Month in our historic history on slavery and different opportunities where we can, again, teach our children. If we teach them well, we will have fewer incidences as they get older.
Thank you. Ceci?
So I think that I'm not sure I mentioned before that I am a clinical social worker, and social work is what brought me out into the field of working in the communities to try and make things better for people. When I was first graduated from Columbia, I went with my master's in social work. I went to a psychiatric hospital to be a clinical therapist. And what I saw there was the impact of systemic racism and systemic poverty, with children becoming the identified patient in the family because there were so many issues in the family that the child bore the brunt of it. So I was working with 7 to 12-year-olds. And I decided, I cannot do this. I have to go fix society. I have to go fix our communities. I can't do it on a one-by-one basis. So I went and I worked at Horizon Student Enrichment Program to make sure that children had access, children from underserved communities had access to education. And then from there, I went to person, and I made sure that people were able to stay in their homes with financial assistance, that we could get them into safe and secure housing, that they had food, that they had clothing, and that they had access to summer camp education, and I set up a scholarship program so they went to college and were graduating on time with a mentor that I put in place. From there, I went to Sandy Hook Promise to help create safer schools. I have done this work my whole life, and it is what I will take to the state.
Thank you. Start with you, Ceci. If elected, how will you vote what is best for your constituents and the state when the state party or national party dictates a different position?
So I think you've probably can tell by now that I'm a fairly strong woman. I love that. Thank you for that chuckle back there. So I will bring what I have loved about campaigning, what I've loved about going door to door and meeting everyone in all 8 communities and talking with people about what concerns them, is because, number one, I love people, and number two, I am doing this to represent the communities that I will be the representative as state senator for. That is why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it because I'm a Democrat. I'm not doing it because I believe in hewing to the party line. You can know that I will be there. As I have done in everything in my life, I have done it to serve the people that I am committed to, and I will do that in our communities.
Toni?
Thank you for that question. You know, people ask me regularly, Toni, why are you still a Republican? You know, you vote for gun control, gay marriage, women's right to choose. You're the only Republican that voted for the public financing of campaigns and the global warming bill, for God's sakes, the only one. And I will say the reason is because I'm a small businesswoman. I've had a couple of businesses. I've worked in business my whole life, except for a little stint as a language teacher for maybe 2 years at the high school level. But there's so many bills that are passed down that are so burdensome and punish business. We're not friendly to business in our state, and for budgetary reasons. That's the reason why. But you can see that I am fiercely independent, and because of that, I am on the independent party line, and they endorsed 90% Democrats. As I told you before, I had a record of having the largest crossover vote by anyone in the state Senate while I was in office. And for those very reasons, you can bet that I'll continue to be fiercely independent if elected, and I get the privilege of serving you once again.
Thank you. Next question is to Toni. Do you support aid in dying legislation as recently presented to the Connecticut legislature?
You know, having not been there in the last 4 years, I recall back when I had a constituent in Westport. This constituent had helped his father die, and for that, he was prosecuted. But the court threw the case out because so many people came forward to defend and support him. And he asked me, Toni, would you come up with me, and I want to testify for the aid in dying bill. I said, well, Bill, I don't know how I feel about that. I haven't made a clear decision yet, but I'll be happy to go with you and sit with you while you testify safely on this bill. It still troubles me a bit. You heard the previous discussion on this. There's still some questions out there that I'm not altogether comfortable. However, I do know that the medical community, my mother-in-law, in case in point, who is a nurse, that not only was she a delivery room nurse, but at the end of her life, she became a hospice nurse. And she would tell me stories about how she literally did help people pass on through a little bit more morphine, whatever it was, when she saw that they were in tremendous pain. But it's interesting to note that in places where they do have this, only about 30% actually use the medication to end their life. There's either a change of heart, or they die naturally, or something else happens. There's still a few unanswered questions that still make me uneasy, but I'm going to wait and learn more as this practice becomes more commonplace in the different states around us.
Ceci.
Last spring, I watched as that bill was progressing, the medical aid in dying bill was progressing through the legislature. And I was very disappointed when it did not pass, because I do believe in medical aid in dying. And I will absolutely vote for it when I'm up in the legislature. I have been in rooms, and as people have been dying, when I was doing my internship, I was at the Jewish Home for the Elderly, and I was present and when several people passed, and also when my dad and my mom, I was in the room with them when they died. I believe that everyone has the choice to make on whether or not they can end their life if they are in extreme pain. And there are guardrails, as was mentioned earlier. There are guardrails. It is not across the board. My dad had Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is not under that. It's not. This is, there are definitely things in place to make sure that it is not abused, and I would support it. And I just want to, now that I said that, and I have a couple more seconds, I just want to say that as a nonprofit executive, I always knew that I was using other people's money to accomplish the goals. So any donations that people made were to accomplish the goals of the nonprofit. I understand in Hartford, it's the same responsibility. So while my opponent talks about being fiscally conservative and socially liberal, I just want you to know I'm a Democrat. I am fiscally conservative and socially liberal.
Thank you. I think we're at our last question and then closing statements, okay? So the last one, there was a question about gas prices having gone down and then now going back up, and what would you do? But I think you can tie that into naming 2 or 3 things that need to happen for Connecticut's economic expansion and what you would do to facilitate that.
And who's first? Me?
I
think I am.
You are, yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So right now, my opponent, Toni, says that everything is terrible in Connecticut. Terrible, terrible, doom, gloom, things are terrible. It's not. In fact, we have tremendous business growth. The governor put in place an Office of Advanced CT. It is the very first ever in Connecticut office where we go out to other places and have businesses move here. We've been poached for years, taking businesses out of Connecticut, and Advanced CT is bringing businesses into Connecticut. In Stamford, the growth of fintech, in financial technology, in New Haven, the growth of biotech, the growth of advanced manufacturing, the fact that Sikorsky and Electric Boat and ASML in Wilton are all hiring. ASML is putting in $200 million in investment, and they are going to hire another 1,000 people. In Stamford, they just put in place the first master's degree in fintech at UConn. We are seeing growth across our state. And what we are seeing is that we had 50,000 people move into Connecticut during the pandemic. They found what we know. Connecticut is a wonderful place to live. What we need to do is continue the work that has been put in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Toni?
You know, as a businesswoman and business owner, I really do have a firsthand understanding of what Connecticut's owner's business taxes and mandates do to a business. You know, it's just this last session, there was more of an expansion. In fact, it was proposed that we should have a statewide commercial property tax on top of the regular local taxes. You know, businesses also have an equipment tax. They have high energy costs themselves. They have huge overhead costs in the way of workers' comp, unemployment insurance, and so many other mandates that drive up their health care plans and their utility costs. These new taxes, including a new diesel tax, has brought things up 23%. When you added this new diesel tax, it also increases the price of food, groceries, and services. We all feel that when we go to the grocery store. There's no question. And I mentioned before that extra 1% on top of the 6.3% sales tax on grocery stores where they prepare foods and on restaurants. We need tax relief. And what I would do immediately is to try to cut and phase out and reduce the state income tax from 5% to 4% for low-income families. We need to index income tax brackets as well. We need to repeal the highway use tax on trucks that start up this coming January. This is going to, as I said before, drive up the cost of all of our food and various services. We also can increase the tax credit on real estate and motor vehicles.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
I'm sorry,
you.
is that it? Okay.
Yes.
I
So
have
you have time. Now it's
go
time
ahead.
to do a closing statement.
Okay.
And Toni, you are first, so you can continue. You have a minute and a half for your closing statement.
Very good. We ready?
Is it a minute?
No, a minute and 30
I think it
seconds.
was
Yeah, a minute
We were
30
told a minute and
seconds.
30
Yeah,
seconds.
a minute and 30 seconds. That's correct. Yes, that's correct.
I've been proud to serve Redding. I've been asked to run again because we have serious issues confronting us. Polarization, divisiveness, and partisanship in politics has escalated to our great disappointment. Political parties have become like rival gangs. By the way, for the record, I do not believe the 2020 presidential election was stolen, and I'm appalled by the events on January 6th. I believe in the peaceful transfer of power and the electoral process. It's time to recover the trust that was lost in our government and civility in our public discourse. This is one of the reasons I'm running, along with reducing high taxes and energy prices, defending our schools from regionalization. By the way, former Speaker Sharkey says it will. Reforming 8-30G, protecting a woman's right to choose, and actually help to propose a state constitutional amendment to that effect, and supporting law enforcement. So no matter who tries to convince you otherwise, I did step up. I did the hard work of negotiating and voting for gun control and also the 2017 bipartisan budget, which had to be renegotiated over and over. I voted for women's right to choose in gay marriage. Now this took weeks, even months, to achieve compromise on so many contentious issues. Working across party lines, finding compromise, and respecting your colleagues are the best way to get things done to achieve our mutual goals. That is what I do. That is how I saved Redding schools $1 million in penalties, stopped the Super 7 highway from ruining our areas, prevented the closure of the Danbury train line, and created the Norwalk River Valley Trail, as many of you know. I love our state, and I have a future in it. My children and grandchildren are still here. So
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to address you. Appreciate
Thank you. Ceci.
Thank you. Thank you all tonight for being here and for the moderating. So on November 8th, voters in the 26th district will choose between two very different records and two different visions for the future. My vision is cooperation and Connecticut values. Our towns are made up of people from differing perspectives, experiences, and political beliefs, and our communities have always been their best when we meet each other where we are, even if we don't agree on everything. That's how I've worked my whole career, treating everyone with respect and creating consensus. It's allowed me to raise tens of millions of dollars for work that matters and deliver results that meaningfully improve the lives of people in our district. I also happen to believe that's how our politics should work in order to keep our communities thriving. Leaders should foster the positive, engaged participation that make our towns such wonderful places to live. My approach will never be one of fear and division. It will always be one of vision and opportunity. When the pandemic hit and families left New York looking for great schools, quality health care, and a beautiful place to live, they found what many of us already knew. They found Connecticut, a state full of promise. And that's my vision. I'm running for state senate because I believe because I understand our local issues. I've raised my family here, I've volunteered here, and I've worked with elected officials to make our lives better. I want to carry on the practice of service to our communities. Thank you very much. I ask for your vote.
Thank you. I believe that applause is for our candidates. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all your efforts. And I want to thank all of you for being here. It's great to have people and be in person. Last year, I believe we were virtual, so this is great. All the viewers, I hope you have had a good opportunity to hear from all the candidates. Very important in order to vote. And all the volunteers, and of course, Bob Moran and Chris Helland, who, without them, we couldn't share this. Thank you so much.